to talk about a beautiful boy. This morning I looked up about a walnut tree. And a walnut tree exhibits strength, longevity. The outside of an actual walnut is very strong. And then it talked about how a walnut tree represents transition into a place such as the death of a lost one. That was God speaking to me this morning. And so now I'm imagining Brian maybe sitting up in one of these branches. So I'd like everybody to start off by standing. And I'd like to everyone just take a moment of silence. Think about Brian. Pray to your God. A few moments. You may be seated. I want to start off by welcoming and thanking all of you. It's quite touching to see how many people are here today, and I know how much it means to Brian's family that you have surrounded them with your love and support, not only in the past 2 weeks, but today. And I, as Brian's aunt, my sister is Linda, I'm very honored to be here to talk about Brian. 2 weeks ago, no one could have predicted that we would be here this afternoon. That means that the last 2 weeks have been extremely difficult. Life is so fragile. When you stop and pay attention, it can seem as though everything around us makes life dangerous. Sometimes the things that endanger us are the most sneaky and unimaginable. I mean, think about it. A sudden heart attack from lingering heart disease catches us off guard, or a moment of inattention while we're driving can cause a disaster. For Brian, it was the sometimes fatal illness of mental illness coupled with severe depression and substance abuse. This illness caused ups and downs and unpredictability for Brian. It also caused ups and downs and unpredictability for the family and those who knew him best. We're not going to dwell on this entirely all afternoon, but there are important things that need to be said. It is impossible to know the darkness Brian lived with. He hid much of it from most of the people that were closest to him. And because we look for explanations and for his death to make sense, we grab at any reasonable logic to figure it all out. And that's a big problem, because we can't. This sometimes fatal illness of mental illness and depression changes how we think and turns rational logic problem solving upside down. That means that there are going to be no real answers to our biggest questions about Brian's death, and we either have to live with that or we have to make things up. Yep, you heard me. One choice is coming to grips with Brian's sudden death is either to live with the reality that we won't have all the answers, or we do make things up. Without realizing it, I bet everyone here at some point has kind of made something up. When we don't know details, we tend to make assumptions and fill in the blanks. Even the newspapers do that. When you hear this kind of speculation, remind yourself that sometimes we have to just accept that we don't have the answers. When you find yourself filling in the blanks, just remind yourself, we don't always have all the answers. If you've been feeling guilty or questioning what you could have done to help Brian more, I think that's really normal. You did the best you could. Brian didn't die because any of you failed, or his family failed, or his doctors failed. Brian died because of this sometimes fatal illness of mental illness and depression. And hear me, you did the best you could do. Brian didn't die because you didn't do enough. Any guilt you have is the result of you making things up and changing the truth. And I just urge that none of you do that. Brian did not simply die. He was pursued mercilessly by a disease that often goes unnamed at memorials and funerals and tears at the heart of those affected. It doesn't matter what type of mental illness someone lives with. What matters is that it can steal so many years away from people who are otherwise wildly creative and a pulsating human being. So let me tell you a little about this pulsating, wildly creative, talented young man, Brian Joseph Lawler. He was born on April 1st, 1987. And I remember because at 11:45 on March 31st, I called my sister while she was in labor saying, "You better hurry up and have that baby or you're going to have an April Fool's baby." Well, Brian was no fool, and just like he did in his 26 years, he made us laugh and smile and changed forever the way we look at April Fool's Day, because now it was just Brian's birthday. He was the cutest darn baby and toddler I think I've ever seen. Sorry, my children. He was impish, outgoing, so loving. He had the largest heart. He grew up in a happy, loving home, going to Los Ranchos grade school, where he received praise and admiration from his teachers. He even tried those normal sports like basketball and baseball, but it just didn't do it for Brian. And I don't even think Jim and Linda understood what would transpire following their decision to buy a trampoline and put it in their backyard. I'm sure that many of Brian's friends that are here today remember great memories of that trampoline and wishing that they could jump as high, do as many somersaults, and as many triple back sideways flips or whatever he did, with as much ease and joy as Brian did. Before his mental illness, Brian always looked at the bright side of life. So I remember clearly one of the many trips the Lawlers came up to Oregon to spend time with us. And we went to the park. And Greg, my son, and Brian wanted to be the teeter-totter. Well, Greg is 2 years plus older than Brian and several pounds heavier. And Greg, that's not saying you're fat, okay? It's just that Brian, as you know, was very skinny and lean. And he was so excited, and he sat on the end of that teeter-totter, and Greg didn't realize that when he jumped on his end of the teeter-totter, he catapulted Brian off of his end onto the ground, and he ended up with the biggest goose egg. And after a few minutes of the tears, he said, "Well, the flying part was fun." That was looking at the bright side of life. Well, it didn't take too long for his parents to enroll him in some gymnastic classes. So beginning in 1996, he began crafting his innate ability to turn, twist, flip, and contort his body into all sorts of shapes. He even made the front page of the San Luis paper with a perfect pose on the parallel bars, with his soon-to-be signature face. Stern concentration with the tongue out like this. And he got that from his grandfather and some other cousins that do the same thing when they're concentrating very hard. A few summers later, Linda, who often encouraged her 3 children to find some new thing to do and experience in the summer, a new challenge, a new activity, and Brian picked diving. Diving wasn't really big in San Luis Obispo, and he proved very early that he had the talent and he had the bravery. He then went to a camp in Mission Viejo, and there those coaches knew that they had a young, talented star and asked if he wouldn't mind coming down to high school in Mission Viejo. But, Miss Gina,
1 minute. So hard to get. Good thing I numbered them before I said it. So can you imagine being 14 years old, moving to a new city, moving to a new high school, living with a family you don't really know, the family of a fellow diver family, and there he went to pursue his passion. Well, he excelled at that, and so it wasn't that long after that the family decided we need to support Brian in this, and Linda and Jenna and Brian moved to Mission Viejo, or Laguna Hills. Michelle was off to college in Arizona. Jim was practicing medicine during the week and traveling on the weekends so that Brian could pursue his passion of diving. He was diving for a nationally recognized team called the Mission Viejo Matadors, and they traveled across the country. At age 16, he qualified for the Junior World Championships that was held in Germany. The Matadors, when he was with the Matadors for 4 years, he placed in the top 10 in nationals every year he was there for 4 years. Okay, and have I also said how smart Brian was? So not only is he diving and practicing hours every day, he graduates with honors with over a 4-point GPA. So Brian received numerous offers from colleges and universities across the country, but he accepted his full-ride diving scholarship from Boston University, where as an 18-year-old freshman, second meet of his collegiate career, he breaks not one, but 2 school records that had been held for 25 years. And those records are still Brian's today. He was also an American East Division winner on the 3-meter 2 times, and once on the 1-meter. He was honored as the outstanding diver of the meet twice, and was also named the most inspirational diver. That most impresses me. That was Brian's heart. In 2007, the Lawler suffered a horrible house fire here in San Luis. And Brian, being in Boston and with his heart of gold, hated being so far away from his family during such a difficult time. And although he was excelling at school and at diving, he decided to return home to California and began school at University of California, Berkeley, where they were not only too happy to enroll him in their school, remember he was a really smart kid, but they also were anxious to have him as a member of the men's diving team. So although he became an accomplished diver, he was also pursuing another talent and passion, and that was his art. So this talent led him to pursue a career in graphic design. In fact, his schoolwork at Cal was so admired that he had several professors wanting to keep his work to show as examples to future students. That doesn't happen every day. He enjoyed art, and his sketchbooks were never far from his side. In fact, after the service, in the reception, you'll see some of his sketchwork for yourself. So when he was in Boston, he met an accomplished artist named Lisa Solid, and she saw in him talent and potential, and actually offered him an opportunity to work under her, and she was going to mentor him. And this was not something that she did often. Unfortunately, right as he was about to accept his next phase in his life, his illness took over him. As I said, Brian had so much heart. I swear there wasn't an animal, a baby, a family member, child, a friend that he didn't love with abandonment. Over the past 2 weeks, I have witnessed the outpouring of love and support for the family. Most come with stories about Brian. One stuck out. A neighbor came by and said, "Oh, I remember Brian when we first moved into the neighborhood, and Brian was about 5, and the moving trucks are there, and they're trying to unpack, and he was the first one to welcome to the neighborhood." And his next words were, "Can I come inside and play?" And the back boxes weren't even unpacked. Another one was when Brian decided to run away from home at the ripe age of 8. He made it all the way to the bottom of the driveway. Then he turned around and came home. But inside his backpack a book called What a Third Grader Needs to Know, and a picture of his family. He loves his family. His sisters, Michelle and Janet, brother-in-law Bobby, his mom and dad, all this extended family that we see. He loves them so much, and they love him. In a short 26 years, Brian made many friends in all sorts of walks in life, all ages. I mean, again, look at all the people that are here today. We know that Brian had this unique ability to touch the lives of people in significant ways. Brian had this ability to let you know that you mattered. He had the ability to let you know that there were opportunities ahead for you in your life. He had this unwavering ability to encourage others and help them see their value. And I think that is the saddest part in all this. Because he could encourage and change other people's lives, but due to his brain disease, he could not see that in himself. We are mourning that Brian had to have such painful problems, but are consoled by the fact that he was suffering. The family was suffering, and now with the love and strength from each other, their family and wonderful friends and community, we are going to honor his memory by re-embracing our own lives, by forgiving and trying to find some laughter again. Over and over again, I've heard this week, 2 weeks, the same kind of theme repeated. There is far too little encouragement in this world, and Brian was one of those rare people with the gift of encouragement. But as important as this is, it is only a piece of who Brian has been to you, each of you. I'm not going to even try and attempt to summarize what Brian meant to you. That's your job. But I encourage you in the next days, weeks, and months ahead to start sharing those stories. Those are the stories that begin with, remember when Brian, and you fill in the blank. They should lead to big grins, amazement, and sadness, nostalgia, and many times roaring laughter. I dare say you will discover something about yourself and something about Brian. When you tell these stories, it's natural to be grateful, especially grateful for God for putting Brian in your life. This is a good day to give thanks to God for placing Brian in our lives. To his family, I know that because Brian has played such an important part in shaping who each of you are, that his death leaves a hole that is huge. It hurts. It leaves us reeling. It leaves most of us feeling overwhelmed. This is a good day to acknowledge that hurt and pain. We know that just like God gave Brian the gift of encouragement, God gives gifts to people so that the work of God might be accomplished. When we care for one another, we are doing God's work. This is a good day to allow people to comfort us. We know that God has made some irrevocable promises to Brian. Long ago, Brian was baptized and became a child of God. That was a relationship that God never promised to abandon. What can separate us from God's love? Nothing. Nada. Zip. Zilch. Not the stupid things we do, not the little mistakes we make, not the huge blunders that hurt others. Not anything at all. God's love is for Brian. We know that God made the promise to Brian to love him, to be with him in thick and thin, and to forgive him. God promised to forgive Brian. That brings me peace today. We know that God promised Brian everlasting life. It is a jumbled up day with all this mixed together. Bittersweet describes it best. It is as should be. Ultimately, we know that God is the source of healing, bringing promise, forgiveness, and most importantly, hope. May we all experience that healing. Now, I would like to turn over to Barbara Bradley. A very long time, I think almost as long as Brian. I think they met when Linda was pregnant with